Hi friends, welcome to PMP session of knowing tips and tricks, and I'm sure you guys would be willing to know how best you can prepare and what are the do's and don'ts when you would like to appear for your exam. In this session I'm going to be bringing you with few things starting from how to prepare for PMP exam, tips to select the correct answer, tips to prepare for your final day. So these are going to be our key items, and I'm expecting that you guys would have already gone through PMP exam training program, and now we are going to be finding out what are the key tricks and tips for us to prepare very well for the exam. Before I go next, let me share with you quickly. My name is Yogesh Arora. Let us start with the first point what we have, which is tips to prepare better for the exam. When I'm going into this, I'm expecting you guys have already taken a PMP certification course and you want ready reckoner in terms of going ahead with the PMP workshop. So I'm expecting that you guys have a good community. You have friends whom you're talking to and forming a group and discussing many things with them. And that is what I call that as the ideal study ambience around yourself. To share with you, in fact, I have seen many people who keep ready one sheet in front of them and which is pasted at many places in their preparation room, and that sheet is called as process chart of the PMP. Now, when we talk about a process chart, this has 5 process groups, which is initiating, planning, executing, monitoring control, and closing. And this has 10 knowledge area starting from integration management, scope management, schedule management, quality management, communication management, risk management, HR management, procurement management, stakeholder management. So we have 10 knowledge areas, and there are 49 processes we have which are going to be covering up all the standard practices and good practices what we should follow while executing a project. So this 5, 10 and 49 chart would be a very good ready reckoner if this is placed at the room where you are generally preparing. And sometimes I have seen people practicing this chart daily basis for at least about once in a day. And the ideal time you should be able to write down this chart would be about 3 to 4 minutes. And there are dual purpose. Why am I talking about of writing the process chart? When you write each of those process charts, you would be able to correlate what is that each of that process is going to be delivering for us. So if you are able to remember a line about each of those 49 process, that's something which is the purpose of it. And sometimes when we are doing that, we also get to know of maybe various inputs and outputs linkage between various processes. When you do that, I expect you have a study schedule already prepared. Generally, it is recommended that after you complete PMP certification course, you should have about 60 to 100 hours of preparation plan. And why am I talking about of this variation is depending on whether you have been exposed to many projects in your past or very few projects in the past. So if you have a very good exposure, maybe you can make yourself ready for the exam in a lesser study hours, which may be about 60 to 70 hours. And maybe if that's a long time that you had been in the projects, then it's going to be about 100 hours. How's that you can keep that schedule of 60 to 100 hours? I'll give you a small trick here. On an average, I expect that you should be able to spend about 2 hours of your time on an everyday basis. And if I consider 2 hours, in a month you reach to about 60 hours time. And what I'm also expecting is that in between when you have holidays coming up or a weekends coming up, maybe I expect you can actually spend a little longer time instead of just 2 hours. And let me assume that maybe on few weekends you have been able to put 4 hours instead of 2 hours. So this will compensate on maybe in case there is any miss on any of the working day. And at the same time, on an average, this makes us to reach to about 70 to 80 hours in a month's time. So on an average, I expect you should be taking almost about 30 days to 45 days to get ready for the final exam. During this time, we can actually go through various contents. If you have gone through the training program from Edureka, you can go through the recordings, you can go through the study material. And then what we can also do is, in case you have a study material and you have the PMBOK guide, which is the project management body of knowledge. And this is the book which is published by PMI. and that becomes a ready reference for the PMP exam. So I expect you can read out a chapter from PMBOK guide, then refer back to the recordings of the chapter. And once you are through with that, you can actually start giving certain practice questions. When you do that, you get to know which questions you are getting stuck, which questions you are getting through. A good schedule would also have a one kind of a folder or maybe about few papers in your hand wherein you will keep writing on the areas wherein you are taking a longer time to decide, and that becomes our key thing for starting up with areas of improvement. And to be precise, in PMP exam preparation, when we go through the contents, we call that as a lesson learned. And the purpose here is when you go through those contents and the places where your answer is not correct or maybe you have a little ambiguity, these points will become my points of study once I have completed the first round of each of those chapters. And the moment you have gone through those contents, you may have a chance to maybe give few more questions in your second round of study, and then we'll be making ourselves pretty much clear. In total, we have 13 chapters when we talk about a preparation. So I expect you should be able to complete those 13 chapters maybe in about 18 to 20 days time. And then the second round, when you go ahead with studying the same contents, your speed would have improved because by the time you have done some questions also, and in the second iteration when you are doing, your focus is more onto the questions which were incorrect. That means more on those concepts wherein you had not been able to choose the right answer quickly. What we have also seen is having a community of the friends who are also preparing for project management professional exam. That really helps, wherein we can ask questions to each other on specific topics and clarify the doubts. Or you have an option to go back to your trainer or a training organization to ensure that you have a good concept understandings and there is a support provided even after the program. You have a link to go back and ask for all those questions and look for the correct answers. The main point here is that whenever you start attempting questions, take a note of the answers which are wrong or maybe where you are getting stuck. And this is something which will help us in doing a nice preparation for our PMP exam project. Rather, we consider that you should be taking this as a project itself. And if you take clearing the exam also a project over and above the training, that would be really good. So when we talk about on the overall PMP preparation, like a proper project, we are going to be planning the training, we are going to be planning our study. And of course, as one of the stages in PMP exam preparation says monitoring and control. So when we make our schedule, we would also like to find out how's the schedule going ahead. So it will be good to fine tune the schedule so that whatever we are predicting, we should try delivering the same by every day end. Even if you are predicting to go with maybe about 60% of the chapter on a one day and maybe remaining 40% on the second day, that's absolutely a perfect plan. But forcing you to go through the completion of one particular chapter and you realize you're running out of time, that may not be a good choice. So it's better to take lesser contents but finish those contents as though there are no more area of improvements in those chapters which you are going through. Sometimes maybe when you are going through this material, you should be very particular of few terms which are being given here. Okay, I'm getting a call from Sanjay, and Sanjay says, should we go through the PMBOK guide at a glance or should we go through every line and details? So Sanjay, thanks for asking this question, and my answer to you is when you are going through the PMBOK guide, it is appreciated that you go word by word, line by line. And when we are not skipping a word or a line in PMBOK guide, that means we would have a thorough study of our PMBOK guide. So for the first time when you are studying PMBOK guide, reading word by word and line by line would be a very good strategy. Maybe when you are doing it second time, you may like to go through from a glance perspective. That could be a better strategy for us to go forward. Let us go back and look forward for more tips for us to prepare for exam. Whatever questions you have, you must attempt all the questions. And the reason why we are saying that is there is no negative marking in the PMP exam, which means that even if you are 80% sure of an answer, do attempt and move forward. So that could be a very good strategy for your preparation. Moving forward, sometimes you have a situation wherein there are more than one answer what you see that as looking okay. However, we know that it's a multiple choice question. There are total of 200 questions. Questions are more on the scenario and situational basis. So be very particular of the options. Be very particular of the equivalent words which you may find. We should try finding out the words which are mentioned in the PMBOK guide. They are part of our 49 processes. So looking for those words could be a better option for us to look for the right answer. So any words which is like a generic word, we should avoid falling in trap of those generic words. There are times you feel like the choices what are given to you are looking alike, and maybe it's becoming difficult for you to find out what could be the right answer. So in those kind of a scenarios, there are words like sometimes, often, may. So be very particular of those words. And these words could be an indication to you to look for better answers. We also sometimes prefer to eliminate two wrong answers what you see out of the four choices and then redo this job and figure out which out of those two is actually best suited as an answer to that query. This decision you can refer back by depending on the 49 processes, by depending on the 5 process groups and 10 knowledge areas. And sometimes what we have also seen is that when you are answering few of those questions from your real life experience of projects, sometimes we have seen that's not the best answer which is coming in from the exam perspective. The reason is in our day-to-day environment, when we are practicing project in our organizations, we are not sure whether all the practices are followed as they are described in the PMBOK. So when you are writing the exam, in our mind, syncing up with knowledge area, process group, 49 processes, and then deciding the answer would be a very good choice to ensure that your answers are correct. Sometimes we have to relate to all the kind of queries which are there in the questions. At times I have heard from people that the questions are very big, questions are very lengthy. If that's the situation you have, wherein you have very big questions, very lengthy questions, in those situations, it would be good to read last one or two lines at least two times, because sometimes there is a story which is baked in from the beginning of this question, and by the time you come to an end, the question is on something different. And sometimes the question is made to check your knowledge, and maybe they are looking at whether you are getting detracted from the question or you are able to pick up the right signals. So when we are in this situation, the last one line or two line that conveys a very, very important message, and that can be a clue to the right answers for us. And as said, the thinking process has to be more from the PMBOK guide and from the PMI's PMP exam perspective. Our general thoughts will have to keep it in the back of the mind, not the front of the mind. Sometimes I use a term called unlearn and then learn. That means whatever you are knowing about the projects before you enroll for the PMP program and start preparing, unlearn those things and try to learn it again as it is mentioned in PMBOK guide. That would be a very good practice to ensure that we are going to be confirming each and every question rightly on the track. Few more tips. On the final day of exam, it would be good to have minimum 8 hours of sleep the previous night. The idea is we would like you to be stable, comfortable, and we also encourage that you should see your examination center maybe a day before or a 2 day before, so that you know the best way possible and you are not late for the program. Generally, the online exams, if we talk about, that happens in the prometric centers, and they recommend that you should reach 30 minutes before your scheduled time of the exam in the place where you'll be going to the prometric. So reaching there in advance will make you more comfortable. And when you are actually nicely prepared, you have done a lot of sample tests and you are able to score maybe about 80% or more in the sample test, I believe you should feel confident. One previous night before the exam, there would not be any need to mug up various contents and try to remember ITTO, which is input, tools, techniques, and outputs, and many other things. Rather, I would recommend that one previous night when you write your exam, by the time you have gone through all the materials, you should be in comfortable mood, not to have any panic or any pressure on your mind. You know that you have prepared well, and you can relate to the situations and questions pretty much easily, and you can crack the exam. So one should be confident of the preparation. Another important thing what we need to look at is, since this exam is of 4 hours duration, we need to also kind of manage our dieting preferences. As far as possible, I would recommend that you should take lighter food before the exam. And when you are in the exam and if you feel like needing some kind of food or a drinks and things like that, if you cannot avoid during 4 hours, you will be advised to keep all these items in a locker which is outside of your exam room. But remember, once the exam starts, and if you wanted to go out for bio breaks or food during that time, the clock is still going to be continuing and time is going to be costing you. As far as possible, keep the time to the lowest, and it is good to have maybe about 4 to 5 minutes break when you maybe go to the washroom after 2 hours or so and come back, just to refresh yourselves, to ensure you are having all the energies with you and the preparation is going pretty well. So these are a few things what I expect you should be able to look at from the dietary preference. And sometimes I know that few people who are diabetic and they need to eat something after frequent hours. So you can carry your eatables with you, but you will be only allowed to bring those eatables outside of the exam center, eat, and then return back. Within the exam center, you may not be allowed to have the eatables there, but you can keep that in a locker. Do not carry many things with you while you are on the final day. The items what you are allowed to carry inside of the exam center would be your 2 government ID cards. Plus, they would be giving you a locker, so you'll be carrying your locker keys. So do not carry anything else which will become a burden for you on the final day. And do not carry your reference books or anything when you go there. Go comfortably with a paper in hand, which is the schedule of your prometric, which you have got it in a writing. Carry that paper with you, carry your ID proofs, and go ahead and maybe write the exam there. And sometimes we also recommend that in case you are able to create the brain dumps, that's a choice what you may have. However, of late, I have seen that the prometric centers are very clearly advising not to keep anything in writing before your exam starts. In the past, people used to write down the process chart and various key things on the blank sheets which are provided in the class. But of late, prometric centers are advised not to encourage that. When you start your exam, you may like to use maybe about few 2 or 3 minutes to write down certain key things. But till such time the exam is not started, I think you are prohibited not to write these things by the PMI and the prometric centers. So these were the many of the few things what we thought could be of good interest. And let me take up your queries what you guys may have. There's a question I have, and somebody says what kind of a clothing I should wear. And I would say you should go with whatever clothing feels more comfortable for you as far as this is decent enough. But remember, the examination center would have air conditioners. So if you are actually going with some jackets or pullovers and anything of that sort, that would really help you so that when you're writing your exam, you should not feel like too cold. So better to have something with you while you are getting in. Next question I have is, do we allowed to carry my pen, pencil, papers and material? And my answer is no. The prometric center would provide you the pencil or the pen which is required, and you are not allowed to bring in anything from the outside. Next question I have is from a participant who's Sam, and he says, do I be carrying my calculator here, or will they provide me a calculator for going through certain formulas? Thanks, Sam. And I would answer it like this. The examination software has the provision of the soft calculator which is built in. So nothing to worry. And as I said, you cannot carry any of those things. Generally, most of the calculations what you would be required to do are not so complicated that you really need a calculator. But for your comfort, the soft calculator is already built into the exam software. So that will make your job easier. One tip what I'm supposed to be sharing with you here is, how do I measure that I'm going on the right speed when I'm starting my exam? So we know that the total number of minutes available to me for the exam is 240 minutes, which is about 4 hours. There are 200 questions what you are supposed to be answering it. So in general, what we talk about is that 1 minute a question could be a good benchmark to check your performance. For example, when 1 hour has already passed and you would like to look at how many questions you have done by that time. So I would recommend, if that's the situation wherein 1 hour has already gone, I would expect you should have at least completed 50 questions, if not 60. Going by a minute a question, it should be 60. But if you are actually completing 50 and above, I would see that's a good speed you are going to be working at. And remember, there may be few questions which are lengthy, which may take little longer time. There may be few questions which are going to be very short, which may take a smaller time. So on an average, a minute a question is easily possible. And I have seen people who have been able to go through all the questions one by one very nicely and able to complete all 200 at least about 20 to 30 minutes before. On an average, I have seen around 3 hours 20 minutes or maybe about 3 hours 40 minutes is a general time people are taking. And the remaining 15-20 minutes, that can be a good time for reviewing certain questions. So next question I have is coming in from Rajiv, and he says, do I have an option of reviewing the questions after I've selected the answer? Yes, Rajiv, there is an option in the exam software which says submit for review. That means these questions which you are not 100% sure and you would like to review them after the 200 questions are through, you can do that. And if you have clicked on submit for review, these questions will start coming up after you are through with all the 200 questions. Next question is coming in from Priya, and Priya says, is the exam questions going to be static for me, or they would change based on how am I starting and answering my questions? Thanks, Priya, for asking this question. The 200 questions what every person would be writing in the exam, they won't change irrespective of whether you are choosing answer 1 or answer 2 or answer 3. That means your answering pattern would not adapt to the remaining questions of your exam. So rest assured, the questions would remain the same and they won't change based on the complexities or the way you are answering it. I'm getting a next question now. This question comes in from Rekha, and she says, will we be given some kind of diagrams also in the questions wherein we'll have to work out certain questions on schedule management? And the answer is yes, you'll be given a lot of questions on diagrams as well. And you can use your rough sheets which are provided by the exam center to you. You can use those sheets for doing your rough calculations. And those sheets are supposed to be returned back there itself. And they won't be used for marking. That's for all the rough calculations you have to do. So you'll be asked questions on various diagrams. So you should be ready and you can do all those calculations there and then on your rough sheets. Majority of the questions you will have is going to be on scenario based and a situational based. Remember, the moment you get into the Prometric Center, you will be CCTV controlled. There are going to be many cameras installed in the room, and that's the reason we also call that as a proctored exam. So you'll be monitored on what you are actually doing it there itself. The next question I have is the 200 questions going to be the same for all the people who are writing the exam in the same place? Most likely, my answer is no. The question set for each of those people who are appearing in the exam would be different. And just for your knowledge, the PMI has a pretty big question bank, and they are ensuring the percentage of each of those knowledge area, each of those process group. But their bank is so big that maybe if there are 10, 12 people sitting and writing the exam at the same time, we expect each one of them would have a different sequencing and a different questions altogether. Anyways, you cannot speak to any of your neighbors, and that's not the choice at all. When we are nicely prepared, we should not be even looking for those choices. There are a few words which you should have a little caution about. In some questions, there is a word called accept. Sometimes you have a word called not. So when you get a word called not and accept, they change the full meaning of the question itself. So you should be very particular of these words. Sometimes I have seen people are rushing towards picking up the answers and going ahead. That should not be the good scenario. Actually, till such time you have not seen all the four choices, you should not be choosing the answers, because when you go through each and every option, then only you will be able to realize which is the best answer among four. And sometimes the answer what you can choose by mistake also is available in an option. The answer which is sounding little generic also is going to be available as an option. So you have to be very, very particular about these words. Try to match up those words from your PMBOK guide. And the next question I have is, do we have questions on formulas? Of course, you have many questions on formulas coming up. And as you know that we have majority of the formulas from the cost management module. However, there are many other modules wherein you would have the formulas coming up. I'll give some examples. You may have questions on schedule management, which is more to do with beta distribution, wherein we talk about of pessimistic, optimistic, most likely estimate. You may be asked a question on present value scenario. You may be asked a question on variance analysis, maybe a cost variance or a schedule variance. You may be also asked questions on the estimate. How do you calculate that kind of an estimate? And how do you calculate the risk? How do you quantify the risks which are there in your risk register? So there could be a question on expected monetary value on EMV, we may call it. And from a communication chapter, you may also have a formula, which is how many communication channels do you require in your project? Knowing the formulas would be very good, and you should be happy if you are getting more of the formulas related questions, because the ambiguity of the correct answer is not at all there in the formulas questions. So you should be clear in the first attempt for all these areas. Majority of the formulas are in cost management, few are in schedule management, one formula in communication management, one or two in the risk management, maybe about a one in the integration management. So these are the key things on the formula. So this is something I am expecting you guys would have practiced with formulas, and this should not be a big deal for you to know forward. The question now I have is, what are the common errors people generally do while writing the exam? The first thing what I've noticed people is that they should be focusing on the words specifically, not focusing on the generic terms. Sometimes people are looking for options which they see that in the real environment in their office, which may or may not be the best choice. Rushing to answer questions without looking into the alternatives is also a mistake people generally do. Whenever you get a question, the first thing you should do is relate in your mind these questions belong to which particular process, which knowledge area, which process group, and then I will be able to connect to my respective inputs, tools, and techniques and output. I'm getting a next question, and this question is coming up from Ranjan. And Ranjan says, do I need to mug up all the inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs? My answer is no. There is no need for you to mug up and cram all the ITTOs. Rather, it would be a good idea to make a thorough understanding on each of those inputs, tools, and techniques and output. That would make the job much better for us. Mugging up should not be a solution at all. Whenever you are doing practice questions, always try to relate what is the concept which is being checked. If you are able to go to the context, it makes the job pretty easier. The next question I have is, do I get more questions on IT or other industries? My answer to you is, PMP exam is a uniform exam happening for all the different industries. In other words, the practices which are being guided by the PMBOK guide and the practices which are being tested in the PMP exam, all these are practices which are happening and maybe getting executed in many of those industries. So you should not be looking into any one particular industries when you are going to be getting the questions in the exam. And to the best of our knowledge, we are expecting that the questions in your exam would be coming in from different industries. So as far as you know the concepts, it should not have any challenge for you to answer it at your level. A key wonderful tip coming in here, this is especially to know what's the role project manager plays when we talk about of procurement or maybe a human resource. What generally happens in many of the organizations is that, especially the organizations which are small, they may or may not have a dedicated procurement department and various other functions. And the project managers, in generally, he is signing up many documents. But when you are actually talking about of role of project manager, And especially when you are going to be preparing for PMP exam, I would recommend that consider the project manager role in those environments for more towards influencing them to take the right decisions so that the right manpower gets selected and right vendor gets selected who is experienced enough and qualified enough to deliver those commitments. So that would be a best thing. Why is that project manager should not be signing the procurement or the HR related documentation is because end of the day, you do not have an authority of those functions with you. You are taking the people from HR or maybe procurement as your stakeholders, and that's how you are executing the project. So make them to take the right decision and let them know what are the areas of improvement or what are the pain points which they should try to address when they are talking about of selecting a person or selecting a procurement vendor. When it is a procurement and other activities are going on, we expect project manager can participate in that process if called by the procurement guy. But the front ending has to be done by the respective functions because they are the one owning up the decisions there. So if you try to summarize all these things, you should be confident, you should have a good sleep, you should have seen this venue before, and I'm sure you have practiced many such things. So that's how we will conclude on all these tips. In case you are looking for PMP exam training program and you have not gone through it before, we at Edureka, we offer PMP exam preparation workshop regularly every month, suiting different time frames for the people. The morning times or the evening times, we have those kind of multiple workshops happening on PMP exam preparation. You can feel free to get in touch with our team or visit our website. We look forward for helping you out to ensure that you become an effective project manager and not just effective. I would rather add that as an certified and effective project manager. Wishing you all the best for your project management learning journey. And if you need any help or assistance, we would be happy to assist you for any of those requirements. Thank you so very much for joining today's sessions with me. This is Yogesh signing off from this session.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!